1982, you started Au Bon Climat with Jim Clendenen, and your focus there was on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
You know, somehow Jim and I needed each other. Hard to imagine, but we really did, as far as having the guts to start up a little business. And so we both had quit Zaka at the same time, more or less, and then Jim went on to Australia to work a harvest. I planted our little vineyard out here, and then we did various things, and then ended up in Burgundy working together. That was so much fun. And then when we got back, I think we just felt like we needed each other to get started doing something.
So your first wines were made in that old dairy barn at Los Alamos Vineyard. And Mary Vigoroso, she was such a character.
She really was. Somehow Jim found this dairy barn that was, had been a bonded winery, or maybe still was a bonded winery. And so we were able to kind of take over there and get going. She had made wines from the grapes there at Los Alamos Vineyards. It was there was some sort of tax deal that benefited doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs at the time as an investment. And so there's this guy, Sam Hale. Right?
Sam Hale, yeah. He was her son-in-law, I think, right?
Right. He put together this group, investment group, and they planted a vineyard because there were some economic advantages to that. And I think he was really looking to deep six his mother-in-law out there. And Mary was she was such a character. I don't think she was, she wasn't born in Italy, but she was imbued with maybe New York Italian history or something. And she was a big personality. I mean, she loved trying to boss us around and tell us what to do. And
she was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, just such a character. And I just remember her coming around and, talking about the boys.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she was, and she would talk about Italy, but she would always pronounce it Italy. And but anyway, she was quite a character, and it was really fantastic for us to be able to, step into this thing that was already a bonded winery. That just didn't exist in our time. In our time, you had to start from the beginning. I mean, there was no such thing as a custom crush facility, hardly.
Right.
It was a pretty rare thing, and so to be able to work there was really a gift for us, even though there wasn't much there. One of the things that I think that we really learned in Burgundy is that we visited a lot of places in Burgundy as well as in the Rhone, but in Burgundy, I felt like what I really learned there was that it just didn't, you could go to one of these new places that had all the equipment and everything, and it didn't necessarily mean the wines were better. And it was really, the winemaker who was thoughtful was the one that was making really good wines, and sometimes with just no equipment at all. It was really, it was shocking for me anyway, to visit Henri Jaillet, who was super famous at the time.
Right.
And he bottled everything. Everything was aged mostly, I think, in new French oak barrels. But there were in his cellar was kind of amazing. It wasn't underground, I think, because I think the water table is kind of high. But so he had strung a refrigeration system inside the winery, but all without fans, just with the fins of the refrigeration unit, so it wouldn't vibrate. I mean, he really thought through the process of what he wanted, and then everything would end up in when it was all said and done, it would end up in a cement tank with a two-spout two-valve hand bottler, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, and so every bottle was bottled that way. And he looked at his wines; they were crystal clear, never filtered.
Right.
And they were beautiful wines.
Yeah. He was so careful.
Yeah.
And obviously, paid so much attention to what he did. And
I feel like we learned that lesson, and so we managed to do pretty good in this primitive dairy barn.
Yeah, no, the Au Bon Climat early wines got a lot of notoriety and public attention and sold to all the right places.
Yeah.
And that's what Jim was really good at.
He was really good.
He was a salesman.
Yeah.
And I mean, not only a conscientious winemaker, but
I mean, he was great with stories.
Yeah. What made you decide to break up with Jim?
We wanted different things.
Yeah.
Jim wanted to become big and famous. You know, and I just love that, Burgundian ideal of the winery that's, pretty petite. Jim saw greater glories out there and that I didn't see. So, yeah, and we, I think we both, by then, we knew what we wanted, and we knew that, that I wasn't going to satisfy Jim, and Jim wasn't going to satisfy me.
Right.
And so, we managed to separate without suing each other. So I consider it quite a success.
Right.
And so Jim bought me out of the business, and then I reestablished I was already I'd already had a business here.
Ojai Vineyards was growing
Right.
during that same period of time that Au Bon Climat was.
And I mean, it was pretty tiny. And then so when I retired down here, it went from a very petite operation to a little bit bigger.
So you were there in the dairy barn from 82 to 88. And
Right.
then in 1989, we got together again after all those years of being together at Zaca Mesa to build a winery out at Bien Nacido.
We worked with the Miller brothers, and specifically I worked with Steve to build the building that we would end up in. They, of course, owned the building, and they paid for the building and rented it from them. But, it was kind of built to our specifications. They were
Right.
pretty primitive or basic.
Functional.
But, yeah, functional is the word. And we wanted to make it functional and not fancy because we didn't have any money really to do that.
Right.
And so it behooved us to keep it simple and functional and so that was a lot of work getting that put together. But I love projects, so it was a fun project to do that.
Well, and I remember, backing up a little bit again, Enrique Rodriguez, whose uncle was working on Los Alamos Vineyard. You needed somebody to help with bottling.
Right.
And Enrique was brought up, he was like 17 or 18 years old.
Right.
And had just moved here from Mexico. And you guys hired him to help bottle.
Right.
And then he moved over there with us to help us with the move and work in the cellar, and
right.
he continues to work at our winery today. We were just talking about that. He was 17, I think, at the time, and he's now 55.
Yeah.
Where does the time go? Damn it.
I remember is that many, many, many years later, 10 years ago, Jim and I were together for 9 years, and then we went our own ways. But years after that, after we kind of reconciled, Jim, he really paid me the compliment of getting him to be entrepreneurial. He just said that, like in his family, his dad was a company man, and he had no concept or thought of doing, of just striking out and doing something.
Sure.
And so anyway, that was really sweet to receive that compliment from him.
He always had so much respect for you, and love for you. I know that.
We went through some hard times, but it was all we got through it, and we both thrived doing what we liked doing best.